Hello, everybody. This is Tanja, and we also have Susan in the line. Susan, can you hear us?
Hello, good morning. I'm in Australia, so good morning, but good evening to everybody else, I think.
If everybody else is in the evening, I'm calling in from Germany, so we're spread all over the place currently, and we're pretty sure that most of you are also in some place not so nearby. And so welcome to our webinar. We hope that you can hear us. You are all on mute at this point, so and we will keep it that way. We will, however, try to have a very interactive session, which means that we'll ask you at different points to use, if you're calling in on a if you're on a computer, to actually answer some of our questions by using tick marks or and not window. The chat window can be found on the right-hand side in your panel, in the webinar panel. So it's the lowest one, and Susan already asked you to send a quick note if you can hear us. If that's the case, this would be a good exercise to also check for whether the chat works for you. I'll just give you a minute to find the chat box and to possibly just say hi. I see some people have asked questions.
Somebody said the chat doesn't work, but so if you're on a mobile phone, the chat usually GoToMeeting doesn't have all the functionalities that you would see on a laptop or a desktop computer. So we're going to be doing a couple of exercises where those of you that are on a mobile phone are probably not going to be able to interact with us as much as we would like to.
Yeah, and the chat tool. So some of you might have issues with either. From my side, so we're trying to, between Susan and I, we're trying to manage it with you. However, we hope we can interact and just give us brief signs either in the question box or in the chat box. That's for our first introduction, and not really to the topic yet. But as you signed up and showed interest in this webinar, we know that you probably read the introductions already. Susan and I and another person, Anja Franz, worked on a study in 2013 and 14 on the intercultural profession. And this webinar is based on some of the results that we have customized for you as those, as the audience, really. We have presented the findings already in different conferences and also in a few smaller publications. But since you are actually our target group and the ones we also polled or studied, we'll be glad to also present this to you here. You've seen our two pictures, and what we'll do today, a bit of a roadmap. We believe we take around an hour or so, depending on how much questions how many questions we can still answer. We'll give you a short intro, which is what I've already started, overview of the research results, and then we'll get you involved, as I've already mentioned, and we'd like you to reflect as well. All your answers, none of your answers are going to be recorded in the sense that we will study, you as participants of this webinar. So don't worry on that side. And if you have questions, please use the question box if you like. So we had already we had a few questions prepared for you, but since the poll tool is probably also not working at this point, we wanted to just check with you whether you actually took part in this survey, how many years you have been working in the field, in the intercultural field, whether you've been paid, so how many years have you been paid and how many were unpaid. We asked this question because we know that many people start off as interculturalists not being paid, sorry. And another question would have been whether you consider yourself actually an interculturalist. And that's a question that many of you may have pondered already. And when we started this survey, we also decided we need to define it for us. There are a few or none, depending on how academic you look at this, how academically you look at this question. No definitions out there. So we came up with one that we thought would encompass everybody's a larger scale of interculturalists. We didn't want to make this a very narrow definition. So our definition is an interculturalist is a person working in a field or profession that actively and analytically deals with intercultural situations. This can include theoretic and practical approaches, but it excludes those who merely find themselves in intercultural situations at a given point of time. So many people would say they work in an intercultural setting. Basically, that's when intercultural also sometimes is the same word for international setting. However, we would define an interculturalist more as a person that actually looks at the field analytically and deals with it analytically. So that's our definition. If you already have comments on that, or if you would like to comment on that, you could use the question tool, which Susan is monitoring. So Susan, if you could give me a sign if there's a question that we should address, please let me know.
There's one question. Can you elaborate a bit on your sample? Pascal, I think we will do that in the next few slides. So just hold on a second.
Yes,
we'll do that.
Right. Yeah, next slide is actually on the sample, so thank you. We looked at it academically at first, defining and then looking at the sample that we actually had. So our next slide shows you, I already mentioned 2013 and 2014 is when we asked questions for about 5 or 6 months. We had 405 participants from 43 countries, which we thought was a very good turnout, and which is something important, and we are glad to always mention this. There have been 2 prior studies similar to ours from 2009 and 2006 by Kate Barrado and George Simmons, and both were, collaborated also in this 3rd study, in the sense that we were able to ask very similar questions and then added a few more questions later on that we thought were interesting, and we'll go into that when we look at the question and answers. So that's the sample. On demographics, we had a larger turnout of females. So those who indicated their gender, there were 216 females and 65 males, and we had 2 participants of the survey who identified as trans. And others, as you can see by the number of people who answered that question, others did not respond to that question. We did not, for those who are academically inclined, we did not force anybody to answer any questions. That's why sometimes the samples of different questions are different, higher or lower. On the next slide, we'll have demographics. We had, not surprisingly, a large turnout from the Americas, mostly Northern America in that sense, the USA with more than a quarter of our respondents of nationalities, and then a large presence from Europe, with Germany being the 2nd largest and the United Kingdom the next. We did have participants from all continents, if you exclude Antarctica. However, we had, as you can probably imagine, we had some countries very less represented, and only one or a lot of them even no respondents. We spread the survey actually in our networks and also on a few mailing lists online through the SIETAR networks. So that's in a way also reflected in who responded to the survey.
Tanja, Pascal has a question about the Dutch. Pascal, do you mean if they are represented here? And if that's the case, then yes, they are. There were definitely Dutch nationals that answered the questions about interculturalists and the field, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily live in the Netherlands. So this is merely a slide about the nationalities. We also asked where they're currently living.
Correct, right. And we only listed the top 5. We later, if you don't know the actual study yet, or if you don't know the publication that we have done, you'll have more responses there. So you'll also see all the countries listed that are below 3.9%. So I'm guessing right now that the Dutch are Canada. Okay, let's move to the next slides on background. We ask what the background of an intercultural actually is. So what is their background and how does that reflect in their work later on? So what is your background? We offered the questions that the answers that you can see here: international adoption, living abroad, intercultural partnership, child of an intercultural marriage, child of a first-generation immigrant, or an adult third culture kid. And as you can see, and multiple answers were possible. And as you can see, the larger, the by far largest population that we asked had experience living abroad and has experience in an intercultural partnership. So those seem to be very defining characteristics for those working in the field.
Yeah, and I think we can have you use the interactivity that this tool allows right now, because I gave all of you drawing rights. So if you try to go onto the actual slide that you're seeing and just make a tick or a circle around the things that you would say your background applies to. So have you lived abroad? Are you the child of an intercultural marriage? What brought you into the field? We would invite you to do that now, also to test out if it's working for everybody. And again, for those that are not on a desktop or laptop, it might be difficult to do. You just like to poll those that are attending the seminar to see, what's the landscape of those that are attending. Okay, I see it's working for a few. Yeah. So we have a lot of people with living abroad experience, just as, our sample shows. And of course, a few of you might have participated in the study. But, we only sampled 405 people, and we already have more than 3,000 people that downloaded the study. So there are obviously a few people we didn't catch. Nice. And yeah, I had to give a few people the same color because we're more than the 12 colors they have here for choice. Nice. Okay, so it's mostly living abroad, being in an intercultural partnership or marriage, and being either the child of an intercultural marriage or of an immigrant. Okay. No adult third culture kids. Interesting.
Okay. Great. So thank you for using this tool. Thank you for answering the questions. So we have an idea of who's with us, Susan, in this webinar. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. We've always listed the question that we actually posed on the slide as well, so you can follow along. We ask, how many years have you been involved in the intercultural field, and how many years have you been earning money with the intercultural field. And this is what we found as globally. The years are around 12 point, I think it was 12.4 years that people have been working in the field as in an average of our sample, and just above 10 years being paid for that work. So there have been around roughly 2.5 years of unpaid work in the intercultural field. We know from, I myself from my own experience, but also from speaking to people working in the field, that many start off working in the field as students, as assistant trainers, or really in volunteer on a volunteer basis in volunteer organizations, and that also counts as experience. And we feel that this is reflected also in this the responses to these two questions. Okay. As a next question, we ask a few questions that we were curious about, a few things we were curious about. So how do interculturalists, or those who define themselves as interculturalists, actually educate themselves further in the field? Because we feel that this is a field that never ends. You keep learning all the time, and we wanted to know how do they do that, and how often do they actually travel. So we asked a few questions on how many books are being read per year, conferences, seminars, webinars, how many publications interculturalists put out there, and how many trips that are being taken. And you can see the responses here. We were happy to see that. So you can tick this off your list for this year already. 1. Apparently the average is around, a bit more than 3.5. So between 3 and 4 webinars per year. Quite a few conferences per year. Books, not so many. 2 books on the field, and seminars very similarly. We know that with an international sample, where you define the difference between seminar and conferences is very different from each country. And that is also reflected in a very similar number of conference or seminars per year. When it comes to domestic trips and international trips, we saw that domestic trips are a bit higher than international trips, and yet the number per se is quite low, both for domestic and international. We also know that, say, a large number from the US, 25% if you remember, and if we imagine most of them also living in the US, between 2 and 3 domestic trips only is not all too much. We don't exactly know what the profile of our interculturalists is, how they work, in the sense like we didn't cross-check for those with few domestic trips also working alone from home and actually giving webinars. That could be an option. But we keep it as it is, and you see the numbers. International trips is between 1 and 2 for work.
Yeah, this could obviously be explored a lot further, right? Why do some people take less domestic trips? They might be working more academically than others, and that could really down the numbers. But as Tanja said, this has been done in our free time, so we could dig a lot further into the data. But we really wanted to give benchmarks to people as well in the industry to work with. And what is nice is that you can obviously also compare it to Kate and George's research that's been done 10 years ago, and you'll see that some of the numbers have changed drastically, and that's one of the reasons why we kept some of the questions the same, so that we can compare the questions and the answers to the questions from 10 years ago and 5 years ago to now. But I think the most interesting for us was that how do people educate themselves? Is it by going to conferences? Is it by going to webinars? Or is it by reading books? And you can clearly see that the virtual component of our industry is winning. Just like we are here doing it now because it's so convenient. People are really embracing the virtual aspect of our work. And I think one thing we're not sharing in a slide today, but we also ask people how they work typically. So are they working face to face? Are they working virtually? Are they working with groups or individuals? And you could see compared to 5 years ago that the virtual work has really increased in the past years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even on conferences and seminars, even though I was jokingly saying only a few books are being read, the interaction that is happening in conferences and seminars also plays a big role. And since this is a field that works on interaction between people, it's quite obvious that this is also a means to use.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the next slide. We also asked about where do our interculturalists primarily work, and Susan just hinted on that as well. So how is their work, is the work of interculturalists set up? And as we also hinted, it's not just trainers out there, not just intercultural trainers, but we have a lot of people working in academic institutions as their primary work field or workplace. We have also a large number that works for nonprofits and for smaller privately held companies between 3 and 50 employees. Quite interesting though. A fourth of all interculturalists that we sample work self-employed, so they have their own company, or they're just freelancers, or they're subcontractors for larger companies.
Yeah, and just to add to that, because
smaller,
looking at the data from 5 years ago, which was interesting in the sense that it was before the financial recession in 2008. I think Kate actually surveyed people in 2007 and then published in 2008, and you can see that the number of self-employed people dramatically decreased since then. So we've had a much larger number of people that were working for themselves before the recession than now, which seems to make sense. And it would be interesting to see how that picks up in the next couple of years, given that the economy is stable.
We're not yet announcing a new study. All right. If you have, as I mentioned earlier, if you have questions, please post them in the questions window, and we'll look at them there. Now we'll get to two slides on motivation, and those are actually questions that we asked for the very first time. So we don't have any comparison to 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So we asked whether, or we wanted to find out whether interculturalists are extrinsically or intrinsically motivated, and we came up with a few motivational factors or statements, and asked them to be ranked. And you're actually looking at the extrinsic one first. So those that look
Tanja,
at income. Yes.
Sorry, just very briefly, I didn't put the motivation slides in here, but we can maybe just give them a summary. Sorry. So they're looking at the page of challenges right now, but why don't we quickly talk about motivation, since you started talking about it, and I'll put some of the summaries of what you're talking about in the chat for people.
Okay, sure. No problem. So extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, assuming that you pretty much know the difference, we found that we have a large so we had scales, very academic, but we felt that we found that there is extrinsic motivation when it comes to status and how other people suggested interculturalists to move into the field, as in parents suggested it, or there is a status connected to this field. So that motivation is there. We have, however, also a strong intrinsic motivation, especially when it comes to the professionals working in the intercultural field. outcomes, you're working together, you're interacting, interact with others is very high. However, when looking at the average, whether there's a larger extrinsic or larger intrinsic motivation, we only found a slight larger intrinsic motivation. So there's a slight intrinsic motivation that prevails within interculturalists, but extrinsic factors are also there. And that was quite an interesting find. And the other slide, there was one more slide on group identification. So do interculturalists actually identify with the group, with other interculturalists? And we found that identification not so large, actually. And that was also interesting and could address actually the next slides, the challenges we have within the field.
Yeah, so we were asking people if we identify as a group. So are interculturalists actually perceiving themselves as a group of people? But because and we've been discussing this both in Valencia, and I did a workshop in Brazil, and we discussed this because of the diversity of the people in the field. I mean, if you look at our demographics in our research report, you'll see that one of the main findings is that we are very diverse. We come from very different academic backgrounds, we come from very different walks of life, we come from very different backgrounds when it comes to our personal stories. So identifying as a group seems almost difficult with that large of a diversity. The only thing that's bringing us together is that we're all working as interculturalists, right? So apparently that isn't as strong enough of a pull to make us feel as a group in its entity, but we'd rather feel like we'd rather identify maybe as a trainer or as an academic or as a facilitator or a mediator. So there, we asked about titles as well, and you can see the diversity of titles that you and us as a profession, we give each other and we give ourselves. And that alone, to me, is an indication that we obviously identify very differently depending on what fills our day and how we define our work life. Yeah.
So you want to continue with the challenges?
Yeah, I'm sure. So one of the main things that we want to focus the rest of the time on here is the challenges that arise in the intercultural field. First of all, because it's something that, as I just mentioned, we've now done a World Cafe on in the SIETAR Europa conference in Valencia in May last year. And I also recently did a similar World Cafe with SIETAR Brazil. So we have a bit of data on top of the data that we already collected with the study that's now almost 2 years old already. So we wanted to have a look again at the challenges that still prevail within the industry. And it's interesting because a lot of the things just keep on coming up, even with the surveys that were sent out 5 or 10 years ago. So I think it's interesting to see how we can actually move forward instead of not just realizing and identifying those challenges, but maybe addressing a few of them. I mean, one of our main reasons for doing this study was to really find out what's sort of hindering the field from moving further. So we wanted to give other interculturalists or other people working in this field, like SIETAR, the opportunity to see, okay, what's really happening, what are the main pain points, and maybe pick out one and address it. So the top challenges that we found in our research field, in the research that we did, was first of all related to acquisitions and sales. So really, how do we sell? How do we acquire new clients? How do we deal with the clients? What's our sales process? Which relates directly to the second point, which is the profitability aspect. So how much are we charging? Can we live off this? And we'll get to this later in the webinar, because it's always a very relevant point to discuss, because we also asked about fees and income. And the last part is, not the last part, sorry, but the third part is the overall dissatisfaction with the development of the field. So that could, that could be some sort of romanticism of where the field started and where it's evolving to, or it could be that really people are just dissatisfied with where it's headed. A few people answered also open-ended questions, so meaning they addressed some of these challenges that they saw in more detail. And we could see there that there's a bit of dissatisfaction with the fact of how we are perceived in the larger scheme of things. So how we as interculturalists come into a setup of whether it's business, mergers, academic life, and what is our value? How is our value perceived? And I think that's where some of the dissatisfaction comes from. Next point was also a disconnect between what is done theoretically, so what is done in research, and what is being applied. So people feel there's a disconnect between academia and application, which I think is very common in any field. But maybe there's something that we can do, especially with organizations like SIETAR, which has both training and research in their title, to close that gap. Next, another challenge that people saw were ethical questions. A lot of them related to branding yourself as something that maybe you're not, or taking work that you're not qualified to do, or using intellectual property of others, getting a client through a referral and then using them as your own. All of these questions that obviously need to be addressed. And I think SIETAR USA has come out with an ethics code that if you haven't heard about it, maybe you should check it out. And the last part was the work-life balance as a trainer specifically. So for those of us that work as intercultural trainers, they saw it as a challenge to balance both work and life, as in, time off and time on the job, probably related to travel. So that means we obviously want to hear from you, since we've been sampling a lot of people in the past 2 years, probably more than 600 by now. What are your top challenges? Can you use the drawing tool again and just make a tick or something smaller so that we can see better of how many people actually? I'll give you a couple of seconds.
And if you have a challenge that is not listed, that Susan didn't just talk about, please also let us know.
Yeah, put it in the chat or put it as a question, or if you can also put it privately if you think it's not something people should know. It's a very personal challenge. Okay, so I see a lot of marks for acquisition and sales. Okay, profitability, work-life balance. Okay, so there's tick marks at everything, but what I think, and this is also why we put it first, what comes up most is acquisition and sales. So how to get new clients, how to maintain clients, and how to be profitable. And that's, I think, also why our research results about income and fees were probably the most interesting to people. And that's why we always put them last.
And we get to those in 2 sides. Yeah. Right.
Otherwise, everybody would.
So you have to wait for 2 more slides.
Okay, great. Thanks, people. Thanks so much for participating. I think it reflects exactly what we found as well. And I just wanted to share very quickly the results that we saw in Valencia. So as you can see, people are very busy in the World Cafe. So we have 2 flip chart papers, and we'll be sharing this presentation with you after the webinar. So I won't go into details here. I just wanted to let you know that it's there, and we also have the challenges from that were identified in Brazil, which are very similar. They're in Portuguese. So if you have any questions, I'm sure you know someone in your network that speaks Portuguese, so you can reach out and interact and make a new connection that way. All right, just very quickly before we move on to income and fees, we also sampled methods because we always thought it was interesting to see what other people are using. I think there is a natural exchange amongst interculturalists to share the methods we're using, but it's very nice to see that in general we're very good at using interactive methods. So examples, storytelling, case studies, and role plays were really the ones that people identified as their main go-to methods in training, facilitation, coaching sessions. Much less so than lectures and models, which are also used, obviously, because I think, as everybody agrees, we need models and theories to sort of base our experiences on. And I think the lectures and presentation aspect is also due to the fact that many people work in academia. But it's always interesting to see what people use, and that's why we also ask open-ended questions. So what it is exactly that you're using? What is your new method? What is your preferred exam? What's your preferred case study? Do you have a simulation you want to share with people? So if you go to our report that you can download, and we have the link in the end of the presentation, you'll actually see a rather large appendix in addition to the study results, and that appendix I think is really great, not just for people starting out, but also for people that have been in the field for a long time, to sift through and just realize how many methods you might not even know about. We also asked about certification programs, any types of workshops to further educate themselves that people have attended. So if you're looking for any of that information and you don't know where to go, I think our report is a great place to start to find out about new things in the field, or just see what other people are using. Okay, so then we'll be at our income slide. And Tanja, do you want me to continue?
Please go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
I'll chip in if I remember something different or additionally.
Definitely. Okay, so we asked people two questions. We asked people once what their annual individual income was, combining all types of work, because we had a hunch that people were not earning all of their money with intercultural work. And then the second question was about their annual income in the intercultural field. And now, I mean, we've had discussions about, how to rate this. We rated it in euros, and people had to estimate and convert it, and there might be some challenges people had, and, was it net or brutto? So this is really like a rough estimation for you to consider, but we weren't interested in the individual numbers. We were only interested in two things. We were interested in the gap between your total income and the income in the intercultural field, and we were interested in the money that people were earning with the intercultural field, not so much with your total income. I mean, it's great to know, but it wasn't really our main concern. So what you can find, first of all, is that you can see there's a gap everywhere. We've only had about 20% of people that actually indicated that their sole work and their sole income comes from the intercultural field. We asked that question separately, where you as participants of the survey had to rate the percentages of how much time you spent with intercultural work and how much time you spent with other time. And there was only about 20% that worked only with intercultural work. And as you can also see, the main income brackets are between 20 and 75,000 in total, and most of the money in the intercultural field by people is actually earned between 5 and 35,000. So caveat, people are not earning all their money with this. That raises the question, can we actually live off this work? And also, how are we charging our services? Because if we're making less than 5,000 euros a year with our work, then are we charging the right amount of fees, and are we valuing ourselves properly to our clients? So are there any questions to this slide in particular? If not, I'll move on to discuss the actual fees. And there's a few other questions here that I haven't been able to read through because I was presenting. Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. How do I go back? Okay. Sorry about that. We're having slight issues because Tanja can't see the can't see the slides here. Okay, I'm gonna get to those questions when Tanja is presenting again. Sorry about that. So let me just go through this and then I'll look at the questions, and Tanja, you can speak. So I'm just very briefly here. We also asked for working hours. How many hours are you spending preparing for a training? How many training days do you have a month? And how much do you spend on actually marketing your activities? Which also led us to, have a look at, okay, how much are we charging and how much time are we spending preparing ourselves and training, which gives you an indication of how much money there is to be made in the field unless you charge more than what the current average rate globally is. And I say that because it obviously makes a difference if you live in Northern Europe or if you live in a developing country in South America. I think the rates will reflect differently depending on your economy. But we asked for global rates. If anybody has a very dear interest in knowing their national rate, they're welcome to to pay us a hourly fee for us to calculate it. I'm just joking. So we are. What we found was that there's a daily rate of 1,200 euros that people are charging if they're working with clients directly. Now, if you're subcontracting, meaning you're freelancing, your rate drops considerably, which makes sense because the people that you're working for are obviously taking part of the cut. But the average rate we found was 685 euros. So now you can estimate if you're way above that or way below it. And if you're way above that, good on you. I don't think you should adjust downwards. For those of you that are below that, you might want to raise the fees. So then also looking at hourly rate, that is obviously very interesting for those of you that are working individually, working as a coach. We found that it's around 129 euros. Okay, Tanja, so I'll give it back to you, and I can look at the questions in the meanwhile.
All right. And actually, our next plan was to get you active again and to looking at all the data that we presented, which is actually what we're concluding now. We're finishing with presenting our data, but we would also like to, since this webinar is called Reflecting Our Profession, we wanted to see with you, knowing all that we know now, is there anything that surprised you, anything that was unexpected one way or the other? And then as a second step, what should be our next steps? So maybe starting with the first questions, was there anything that surprised you or anything that was unexpected? And again, since Susan is looking at the questions right now, anyways, you might please use that same box again.
Yeah, so there was one comment by Melissa that about challenges, that one of the related challenges is that she feels we don't have a lot of leaders who are open to talking about how they became successful. And I mean, just personally, I very much relate to that, Melissa. I think one of the reasons we haven't talked about why we did this study was that we became so frustrated with not knowing how people were actually successful in this field, because every time you'd meet somebody, it was a very different story, or you would get the impression that people were working 100% in the field making a lot of money, where that's actually not the case. So hence the study, of clarifying what is the actual status of this field. And I think by having these benchmarks, it's a lot easier to talk about, okay, so what are you doing on the side? How are you staying sustainable and profitable? And I think it would be very helpful for more people that have been in the field for a long time to talk about their path of success. I very much agree. Okay. I don't see any.
Or maybe if I may add,
yeah.
If I may add to this, sorry, Susan, the point that not so many come forward to speak about it in public or to everybody, or in a presentation that you can then look at online, I would, if we are in need of that, right? Even after the study, it's always good to seek chances to meet those that you look up to, or those who seem successful, whatever that means to the individual or to you looking at a successful person, and really seek out possibilities, asking them. Most people like to talk about what they do, so asking how they became successful, or what makes them be successful, is probably a good way to finding out, and also hearing those different stories, even though that's frustrating that there's no one path to success. Hearing those different stories, one or the other will resonate with you, or will be something that you can emulate, that you can follow, or suggestions you can take. So that definitely also helps. But very well, so if people are very those successful in the field, they're very private in that sense when it comes to how to be successful. And
there was another.
I agree with that, Vanessa.
There was another comment here of what surprised you. Juriga says, I was surprised by two of the challenges, sales and work-life balance. Being a freelancer, trainer, entrepreneur is all about selling, so we should spend at least 50% of our time selling our solutions. I think that's a very good approach. But then again, a lot of people are freelancing and are basically outsourcing the sales part to a larger organization, right? But there's always something you can do as an entrepreneur to be proactive about that. So I very much agree. But again, those are the challenges that people in the survey found.
And those are also the trade secrets, right? So how do we become more successful in sales and acquisition? What do we do to do that? Do we actually get training to do that? Has anybody taken a training on how to be better salespersons of our own work? Not me, to be honest. So that's definitely something to look into, and maybe a niche that can also be filled.
Yeah. And one point here, which is very relevant, is by, I can't see the whole name, I think it's George? No, I don't want to say the name wrong, but the comment is success only defined by in cash?
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying yes as in I understand the question.
Yeah.
And it's not, yeah. I would think.
Would hope. I think that's also what we found, that many people who are in this field are not in it for the money. I mean, we asked for extrinsic motivation, and one of the questions that was least agreed on was that they entered the field because of the money or the status that is associated with it. It's much more about helping people. Another point is here on work-life balance. I really love this job, and it's extremely difficult for me to differentiate when I work and when I'm not, because doing this job means having fun for me. But I feel that's a very good challenge to have, is to have fun on the job. But okay, there's a whole other debate about work-life balance going on at the moment. I think the question is, can you actually balance between work and life, or do you just have to prioritize from one day or one moment to the other differently? But I definitely see your point.
And does work imply that it's not fun? It can totally be fun, and it should, ideally, most of the time.
Yeah. Good. So those are all the comments that I've received so far.
All right, and some of them and our comments on those comments also kind of look at what should be our next steps. So apart from what we just mentioned or how we discussed this, is there anything else that you feel this field needs to address? What should be next steps?
And you are welcome to also unmute. I can unmute you if you raise your hand, and then you can also speak to us live if you don't want to type. Barbara has a question. What do you believe is SIETAR's role in this? I let you answer that, Tanja. Tanja has been more involved in SIETAR, I think. In bringing.
Well, I think SIETAR as an organization. Sorry, is there a second part to the question?
Yeah, there was an
Susan?
add-on. Sorry, I just saw. So in bringing forward the profession, is what she asked.
Yeah, okay. Well, since SIETAR is considering itself an organization that unites professionals or those who want to become professionals or who relate to the field, I would think that if different SIETAR organizations, because we know that there are different SIETARs, etc., if they help defining standards, I know that there are initiatives out there to do that. What standards also based on qualifications of trainers, for example, or of those working in the field, connecting theory and practice more, both ways. Those are things that a professional organization can actually support by also using their name and their collective power in that sense. And since the field is in no other way defined, we know that it's a professional field, but it doesn't mean that you have to have a certain degree to work in the field. Since it's not defined, we have all the power in the world to define it for ourselves. And all these issues that we are frustrated with or that we deal with and have problems with as individuals or as a group, those could be addressed in a larger setting. And through an organization such as SIETAR. And so I would totally think that SIETAR can play a role and should play a role. However, an organization is only part of its, it's only comprised of its members itself. So we're back down to individuals. And there we have the issues that, people have to take a lead. There has to be motivation to form groups, to work on certain issues. And that, again, is an additional story that probably works differently in different SIETARs and in different organizations. So I would take definitely, especially when it comes to professionalization, to become more professionalized, that's where SIETAR could play a role. And one much more basic, but even also important issue is that it connects individuals. There's a lot of people out there who work alone, and alone as in not daily interaction with colleagues. And SIETAR definitely helps connecting people, and that's an invaluable, a very valuable point.
Yeah, I think that's how many of us.
Basic to even get started.
I think that's how many of us found SIETAR, right? Melissa has a comment to what Barbara said. She mentions that one possibility is for young SIETAR, in that case, because that's Melissa's organization, to create its own training on an introduction to the intercultural field. So if I understand that correctly, it would almost be like an onboarding, like many organizations have. We would offer, as SIETAR organizations, we would offer people sort of an overview of the field. I think that's a good idea. Barbara also asked that if we could make a poll to see what people want from SIETAR, like offering a certification or something similar. We can't do a poll right here, but honestly, let's just use social media. I think we can do polls on Twitter and maybe even Facebook. If people comment, I think that would be great. Just ask the members, right? I think oftentimes if you send a survey via email, people feel less inclined to respond. But if it's just a quick question on Facebook or something, I'm sure they would respond. Another point here, another comment. Next steps: culture of economies, culture of international relations, culture of politics, religion, world issues are missing from kiss, bow, and shake hands. Okay, I agree. So a much more global perspective with involvement of interculturalists in politics, religion, international relations, if I understand that correctly. And then Alexander says, open to your borders to professionals who are not interculturalists. Your narrow definition in brackets, purpose of SIETAR also question mark. So let me sift through that. Open to your So we should open ourselves to it, professionals who are not interculturalists. I very much agree. I think we can only benefit from collaborating with people that are not part of our mindset and our industry. If we can educate them, they can educate us. I think the field can grow. And if that's the purpose of
However,
SIETAR, I don't know.
Here?
Yeah.
Maybe on the part of interacting with other professionals, I'm not sure if I understand the question or the comment correctly, but if I look back to the slide of where interculturalists, or those who answered our questions, earn their money, since they don't earn it only with the intercultural field, most of us, that means there is a side profession there. Whether that's the main profession or not is a different story. But apparently interculturalists per se are quite interdisciplinary already. So that's a good basis to actually having this background, having a diverse background within the individual. And that's a good basis to reach out to others. But I agree that it has to be done much more purposefully and directly, and not just by chance. So I agree with that. I just wanted to point out that I believe that a lot of interculturalists are not solely interculturalists.
Yeah. Okay, so if there are no more, I don't see any other comments or questions. So then I think we can wrap it up, because we're 3 minutes.
We have one more.
Do we have another?
Okay. Do we want to skip the? No, we'll actually give you one homework, which we will not,
exactly.
which we will not correct. So one homework to continue the reflection for you would be to look at something that that Kate Barada actually already came up with, a self-assessment tool to look at what are the strengths that I, as an individual, you therefore, have as an interculturalist. And it has been broken down into formal education, life experience, method skills, work experience, personal qualities, and application areas. So the fields that you work in. And we have the slide that I think Susan is probably showing right now, shows that you could list where your areas of strength are in those 6 fields. And then for yourself, look at where do I have scope for improvement. So looking at those 6, where am I good at? Defining that a bit. And then looking at what can I do better? Especially now concluding also with our webinar, looking at what we have looked at, what we have learned over the course of the past hour. So that would be our homework for you. And feel free to use this, once or regularly to really see how you can develop your own field, your own profession.
Yeah. And I see a few people are actually drawing on the slide right now, which is great. Just take a screenshot of it, or just remember the 6 areas. It's a very nice tool that Kate developed to look at the different aspects of our field and what we need to be successful, and then see where do you have areas that you can develop more, and which one can you build up from. Also, when you're working with clients, selling yourself, or applying for a new job, whatever. I think it's a helpful tool. Yeah, I think that's all. There was one more comment here that I just want to read, because I don't want people to feel like we're not reading it or taking note. Let me see if I can find the name here. Shimen. Oh man, I can't read the full name. I'm very sorry. I don't want to cut off your name, so I'm not gonna say it. But it's written here that I think it's important to look for the studies made by students related to interculturality, as well as an intercultural bachelor's, master's, so we could see which are the actual topics worked and studied on, and the students can start to make real networking and have a platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point of like actually looking, okay, what is being studied and what do you need in the work, what, you know, and then make a connection. I think that's a problem that many people see in, you know, in academic life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I'm gonna
Well,
put on the last slide where you can see um, the link to the study.
right. So the first one is the full status report of the intercultural profession that we based this webinar on, and you can download that for free. That's the page where it can be found. It's a large exercise. It was a large exercise. It's a large document. Don't press print before looking at the number of pages. But it's a good read, we feel. And a second one that we mentioned also, we presented in Valencia. Apart from the World Cafe, we also published a study, and that can be found in the book that is online as well, and that's the link. And
say what
with
the
that,
study was
really,
about.
we can wrap. Oh, the study was. Oh, yeah. We actually, sorry, the name of the study is not there. The study was actually about the gender wage gap that is also there in the intercultural field. So we took this into our data and looked at pay for women and men across the board in the intercultural field. So if you're interested in that, that might be a good read for you as well.
Yep. And I think with that we are like 2 minutes over time. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you're still present, and you know, if anybody has questions, feel free to send us an email or find us in any way you can. We're happy to answer questions or point you into directions of different things that we've come across. And then, yeah, I mean, just thanks for being here and listening. We've done this webinar similarly before and just love to share all the results because really our aim was for this to reach as many as possible so that people don't have to start from scratch again and have an idea of what's going on and can take the discussion from there.
Mm-hmm. And in a way, we're also hoping that we're contributing in that way to developing the field, which was one of the items mentioned earlier. And before we say goodbye, I also want to mention that this webinar was actually cooperated. No, it was actually hosted by Young SIETAR's platform that we could use. So thank you there. And organized by SIETAR Austria in collaboration also with SIETAR Italia, or Italy, I believe. So thank you very much for letting us present this study and for also being open to this way of showcasing information that we have or experiences that we have. And thanks to all of you being there.
Yeah. And have a great day, evening, or morning, wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye-bye.